enough of wasting time. Dispatch 613, stop 17. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is that building ahead of us, kind of a white brick building. Anybody been in there? It's an air-conditioned mall, and it's called Clinton Square Market. But we will call it building number 1, because that was the first masonry building built by the U.S. military downtown. It was built originally as a coal depot. They stored coal in there. And some people would tell you the upstairs was a sailmaker's loft. That's not true. They did store sail up there, but it was not a sailmaker's loft. Now, the USS Maine on her last journey to Havana got her last issue in our harbor for coal out of this building. Of course, she blew up in Havana Harbor on the 15th of February in 1898 and brought us into the Spanish-American War. We know now that the Maine blew up not because of a Spanish mine that the newspapers in the United States did, but because there was a spontaneous ignition in her coal bins that ignited her magazine. Now, to the right, a large red brick building is the Key West Customs House, built in 1891. That's where the wrecking cases are heard in federal court. And guys, I'm going to talk a lot about the wrecking industry. It made us rich. But it was built with your tax dollars. That building was built with 17 working fireplaces. The slanted roof was built for easy snow removal. I am not making that up. It just happened to be the design of the day and your taxes working for it. Now, the plot of ground on the right is called Clinton Square. That's a memorial for 187 Union soldiers that died on this island of yellow fever during the American Civil War. And a lot of people don't realize that Key West was a Union-controlled city in the Confederate state of Florida for that war. That'll come up again on my tour. Now, to the right, Jesse Stan is at Mel Fisher's Maritime Museum. Mel Fisher discovered the mother lode in 1985 that were 2 Spanish galleons, the Atocha and the Santa Margarita. They went aground in the hurricane in 1622, 30 miles west of here. And since that discovery, they've brought up over $400 million of gold, silver, and emeralds, and they are still bringing it up today. 21 months ago, a 390 uncut emerald was brought up at 19 feet of thickness. It was uncut, but that's still a big emerald rock. Now that brings me to our first stop. This is stop 1A. The presidential gates on the right lead to Truman's Little White House over the rise. So if anybody wanted to walk into Truman's Little White House, this is your closest stop to do so. Anybody get in out? Okay. I was a chef all my life before I retired, and I've actually cooked for 2 U.S. presidents in there. I was invited, one of 6 chefs that was invited to cook for Jimmy Carter and his family, and one of 5 chefs who were invited to cook for Bill Clinton and his wife. Now, coming up on the right, when I turned, there's a building that was the beginning, that was the house that began with Pan American Airlines. In October of 1927, a man named Juan Trek started the commercial airlines Pan Am out of that building. And you know what, I just thought about something, because I got a lot of young men on board. Sooner or later, I'm going to have a very young crowd on board, and they're going to say, what was Pan American Airlines? It's not there yet. Now, right now, I want to mention the worst fire in the history of Key West, the 1886 fire. And you'll understand why I reference it right now. It was a fire that started downtown and burned for 12 hours out of control of the harbor, killing 137 souls. Worst fire in the history. Now, one of the reasons I bring it up right now is because on the left, every house in this block, left and right, is a rebuild after the 1886 fire. That fire destroyed every house in this block. Every one you see now is a rebuild, including the Curry Mansion Inn on the left. The home of Big Bill Curry, who was the richest man in Florida when he died here in 1909. The Currys still own that guest house. I'm related to those Currys on the fourth side. Now, there's a brick house here on the left. This is actually the first house that was built on this block after the Great Fire. But get a good look at it. You won't see any brick homes. That was a knee-jerk reaction. We can't make brick in Monroe County. We don't have any clay soil. And I don't know if you've ever been hit in the foot with a brick, but they're heavy. So anything down on 76 will make it what? Expensive. Too expensive to build homes with. That's why you don't see brick homes on this island. Now coming up on the right, you guys might be interested in this. It's the Key West Federal Building, built in 1931. It's made out of Key Largo limestone, the story 90 miles from here out of Morocco. You look real close, I'll go by slow, you can see sponges of marine life embedded all through this limestone. You guys are looking at 1.2 million year old compressed oil beds in the limestone. Florida at one time was covered by shallow tropical seas, and there's a lot of that out there, and we're built on it. And by the way, Florida again will be covered by shallow tropical seas, but don't lose any sleep on it because you and I won't be here. Now this is Caroline Street. If you're a Jimmy Buffett fan, Jimmy recorded several times and actually co-wrote a song called A Girl Going Crazy in Caroline Street back in the early 1970s. When that song was written, this was a very tough part of town because all of our shrimp boats were still in the harbor we're fixing to see. Back here was all shrimp and Navy bars, and you did not come down to this end of Caroline Street after the sunset, unless you knew something that was called what's what. Now we'll see the harbor in a minute. All the shrimp boats that were in the harbor were relocated to Stock Island by the mid-1970s, by 1975, and we'll talk about that some more later. Now coming up across the street on the right corner, you see a two-story white dress shop with red doors and shutters. Now the color scheme is that way because when that building was built, it was a bar downstairs, and do I have any young children? Okay, good. It was a whorehouse upstairs. Now they called it the Red Door Saloon, and it was considered one of the toughest on the Gulf Coast. And some of the drivers, many of them, will tell you that if you went in the Red Door Saloon without a knife or a gun, you could borrow one at the front door. It's a very entertaining story, but children, this is not true. There's absolutely no evidence at all of that. And think about it. If you owned a bar in a house of ill repute, probably the last thing you'd do is make sure everybody was armed to the teeth before they came in to get drunk. Funny story, but it's just probably not true at all. Now you guys all have trolley tickets, and one of the things that trolley gives you to get to you is a walk through the Sales to Reels Museum here in the left corner, that little yellow building. Your ticket will get you free admission, and that is very, very much worth going through. One of my favorite little museums. You don't have to do it today. You can bring that trolley ticket back 6 years from now and still get free admission. And that brings me to stop 2. The harbor's ahead of us. Now when I leave stop 2, and I'm leaving right away, I'm going to tell you why I believe that harbor ahead of us is the most important story in the history of Key West. Judge my dialogue for yourself after I tell you the story. Where it says a yellow car, where it says no parking. Does anybody get around here and stop too? No? I don't see anybody to get on, so we will continue on. Okay, why do I think the harbor is the most important story? A mile and a half to our left, and we'll see it in a little bit, is the Atlantic Ocean. To the right is the Gulf of Mexico. Now, 95% of the tropical storms and hurricanes that come through this island come from the Atlantic, headed for the Gulf. The storms come from our left, they blow to our right. So picture ships in the harbor on the right. Because for as much as they can be, they're protected from those storms by the entire island. So children, this is not only a natural deepwater harbor, it's a natural deepwater protected harbor. I'm going to carry that further. In 1819, Florida had become a possession of the United States. The man who owned the island at the time was not part of that deal. He was a Spanish gentleman living in St. Augustine. His name was Juan Pablo Salas. But he saw no future for this island. It was half the size it is today, and there was absolutely nothing here. So he sold it. John Simonton and John Whitehead. Those boys paid him $2,000 in gold for this island. Now, why did they want it? Well, John Whitehead was a sailing master from Mobile, Alabama. He knew exactly what he was looking at because he had been in Anchorage in this harbor before. He realized that this island and harbor happened to be at the perfect place at the perfect time for 3 massive sail coming in and out of the Gulf. He thought about it before anybody else. Now, what did he think about? Kids in the early 1800s, there were no trains in the United States that had yet to reach the Mississippi River. So everything had to come down the great rivers, and they were put on sailing ships in the Gulf. New Orleans, Pensacola, Mobile, and sent to the rest of the world. And if you guys know three masts of sail, it's safe to get in and out of the harbor, the Gulf, without getting the bottom of your boat ripped away. They tacked on this out of the harbor. So yes, we were at the perfect place at the perfect time for sailing ships. Now, because of all the sail traffic coming in and out of the Gulf of Mexico in the early 1800s, piracy in the Caribbean was rampant. Now, the United States Navy, once they got wind and Americans owned this island and harbor, they sent their mosquito fleet to control the piracy. The Navy got here in 1822, and the Navy has been on this island in force since then. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Down the street at the end, you see what looks like a big old tin warehouse. That's the Concord Public Seafood Company, but it used to be a warehouse and ice house for Bill Singleton for his shrimp boats, and he had 6 of them that were docked in front. Now you get a good view of the harbor here. I want you guys, everybody on board, to do me a favor. Take every boat, take every Coast Guard cutter that's in your vision right now and take it out of the picture. And replace it with 110 shrimp boats. Because until 1975, children, that's exactly what was up. Like I said, this is a tough part of it. Now, the Concord Public Seafood Company, back in the mid-1980s, started being built as a restaurant and bar. I was the kitchen operations manager at the house at the time. My executive chef and I were paid $1,500 cash each to design their kitchen. It took us a half an hour and a 6-pack of beer to do it. And it was the easiest $1,500 I ever made in my life. And did I report that money? I did not. If you work for the IRS, you come and get me. By the way, my chef's name is Phil Kramer. He's still on the island, retired. Now, the 1886 fire not only destroyed 70% of the downtown, it also burned down every tobacco warehouse that was on the island that was downtown. Every one except one. And that was the one owned by Big Bill Curry. Now, why didn't Curry's warehouse burn down? It's here on the left. It's happened to be the only one that was made of brick. Curry shot big metal doors that used to hang there, and when that fire was brought into control, Bill Curry had $100,000 worth of prime Cuban leaf tobacco locked away. And he owned the cigar industry for about 8 months. And that brings me to my next stop across the street, stop number 3. This is the closest to the small end in Duval Street of Sloppy Joe's Bar. Stop 3. I'm going to stop short because there's 2 scooters down the other end. So I'm stop in and getting out. Anybody getting out in stop 3? No? You open the doors if anybody's getting on it. Stop. Right.
Going back.
You guys got 4 back there? Good. Good. You ladies are okay behind me?
Yeah, we're fine.
All right. Stay seated, no alcohol. Keep your body parts on the side. I'll take the rest of it from there. Okay, I told most of you guys about the 1886 fire. One of the things that burned down was the Key West City Hall. The new one was built dead ahead of it, it's a brick with the beautiful clock tower. Now we have even a newer one now. But I want to show you the side of the old City Hall when we go by. You'll see 4 arched doorways. That was our modern fire department. They were horse-drawn fire engines. The horses were stabled up behind them. Now we never had 4, we only had 3 at the most. Now coming up on the left, it's most famous cars in the world. It was Hemingway's favorite car. It was owned and operated by a man named Joe Russell. People named Josie or Sloppy Joe Russell. He and Hemingway went back to the 1920s together. They were both ardent sport fishers. They loved fishing for the blue marlin out on our Gulf Stream. I've never landed a blue marlin or a white marlin for that matter. I don't intend to go out for bill fishing on this Mayfield boat. I would go out for things that I can stick in the pot. The Wall Street that I'm turning on, it happens to be the longest street in the world. 4 blocks to our right is the Gulf of Mexico. 10 blocks ahead of us now is the Atlantic Ocean. It's the only road you'll ever be on. You can walk from the Gulf to the Atlantic in about a half an hour. Or you can do something the locals call the Duval Crawl. That is, if you're old enough. The Duval Crawl is walking the length of the long street, stopping at every single bar along the way to have one beer. Just one beer each bar. Well, 27 bars in the bar. Might take longer than half an hour. You Boy Scouts don't even think about it. Anybody from Kentucky? Are you really? Duval Street is named for probably my favorite person in the history of Florida, and he was a Kentucky man named William Butterfall. He was from Bardstown, Kentucky. William Butterfall was Florida's first territorial governor. He was appointed territorial governor in 1822 by President James Monroe. He remained territorial governor for 12 years under 3 separate administrations. Amazing individual. On the right is the oldest house museum. That house goes back to 1829. The home of a record captain named Francis Wallington from the Bahamas. He and his wife raised 7 daughters and no sons. I like that little oldest house museum because of the backyard. If you get a chance, the backyard behind the museum goes almost to the end of the block. It's one of the largest backyards for the size of the house. Now this is for my wife. On the left, coming up across the street, is the oldest non-Roman Catholic church in Florida, the beautiful St. Paul's Episcopal Church. The church property goes back to 1832. I am not a member, I am a heathen. But my wife very much is a member of that church, and Father Larry is one of my poker buddies. If you get a chance, go inside Larry's church and look up. You'll notice the high vaulted ceiling looks like an upside down ship. Kids, that church was built by ship's carpenters who didn't have a clue how to build a high vaulted ceiling. But they knew how to build a big boat upside down and hoist it to place, which is what they did. I am the official shop of St. Paul's when they insist upon it. Now, how many empty seats do I have back there? You got one. I have one empty seat. That's it, right? Really? Just one? Okay. Now, I think I have 3 people here. Here's what we're going to do. I got one empty seat in the back, and I can let 2 people have the jump seat. Yes. We're going to take this and throw it right in front of it. Yeah? And you have 2.
Yeah, we have 2. There's one in the back.
And I've got one in the back. Dispatch 613. I'm at stop 4, and I got code yellow for 2. Can I give them an ETA? Copy, man. Dispatch is sending an empty trolley for you. It'll be here in less than 10 minutes. Okay, so stay right there. And I'm sorry about that. It's the Boy Scouts of America. You can blame them. Nothing like it. I'm a big Jimmy Buffett fan. Jamie got his real story on the island. Jimmy Buffett's original Margaritaville restaurant and bar is coming up on the right on this next block, and he still owns this restaurant and the building that's in it. And he still comes back here at least once a year to play. And he was here 4 months ago for the Songwriters Festival that comes every year. And he actually did a 20-minute set inside the little Margaritaville here, and the police had to block off this entire block.
So good.
Now, the cage structure on the right with the 3 arches is called the St. Carlos Institute. That's a rebuild. That's where the Great Fire of 1886 began. Now, children, we now know, and we have not known this very long. For years, we thought the first one in our history had been the city. Well, 6 years ago, we were informed by archivists at the University of Madrid in Spain that our fire was intentionally set by agents of Spain. Why? Well, Spain was trying to send a message to the cigar industry of Key West about sending funds to Cuba to support the revolution. We never knew that. The fire was not meant to be so destructive. It was just a warning. And the winds took the fire out of control and became the worst in our history. And they used the San Carlos, by the way, as ground zero for that fire because that was the big social center for the Cuban cigar manufacturers. And it's still a very central point of the Cuban ancestry on this island. It's an amazing little building to go through if you get a chance. Now, one of my favorite people in the history of Key West is a man named Sandy Cornish. Now, Sandy Cornish was born a slave. But he fought his way to freedom up in the Panhandle of Florida in 1850 by working 10 years on the Tallahassee and St. Mark's Railroad. But he made his way to Key West in his life and became two of the most prominent business people on the island. Now, in 1865, to celebrate the end of the American Civil War, Sandy and his wife built the first all-African-American church on the island. And today, it is considered the oldest Baptist church of Key West. Now, there were many older, but they were destroyed by hurricane and fire. Coming up on the right, we call this the AME Zion Church. It's one of my wife's favorites. Now, if you get a chance, go up the steps on this church and check out the front doors. What you'll discover is they're built with no locks. They are not locked. They have never been locked. In his will, Sandy demanded that the front doors of that church never be closed. So they built those doors without locks. I like that. And that brings me to my next stop, and unfortunately I got people here too. Now, this is the closest to the Hemingway house, the lighthouse, and my house. The Hemingway house is a block on the left. My house is a block on the right. My house is 2 blocks ahead. Anybody get here? Scared. You got 2 people? All right. Oh, wait a minute. Bring that girl back here. The one that just got off. Ma'am, you get back here and get up here just for a second. You're not getting away with that. You get up here. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow this girl turns 30. I just happen to know that for a fact. I love you. I heard that earlier and I never forget it. To the left on the next block, behind the brick wall.
There's a restaurant that's Moon something.
Oh, Moondog.
Is it good?
Yeah, it's okay. It's up here on the left. Yeah, 1 block down this way is Little Heaven.
Maybe that's better, huh?
To me it is.
Okay. We'll follow you.
Well, I don't know
You're a
you.
chef.
I used to like Little Heaven. I liked it right.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Take care.
You too. Have a great day. Thank
So
you
I
so
know I
much.
got 4 seats that are empty. I can sit 4. How many you got?
4.
You're right. 6 by 6. Now, those of you that aren't able to get on, come and talk to me just for a second, because I've got 2 more people at the last stop that could not get on, so they've sent it into trolley for them. So there'll be a trolley coming through here in about 8 minutes with plenty of room. Okay? All right. Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway and his second wife, Pauline, Mr. Hemingway moved away to find wife number 3. Miss Pauline stayed on this island until she passed away. She was actually good friends with my grandmother, who lived on the next block rather than now. As a matter of fact, my older brother said that I met Pauline Hemingway, but I'll be honest, I have no memory of it.
Mundo.
The Hemingway house is here behind the red brick wall. Now, the house is known as French colonial design. It was built in 1856 by a record captain named Issa Tift. Now, if you've ever heard of Tift College or Tifton, Georgia, they are the same 4 brothers from Connecticut. 2 of them settled here, 2 of them settled in Georgia. Now, if you twist a little bit to your right as we come to the end of the block, you're going to see a large, round, white cement structure. You look to the top of that, you're going to see a lighthouse. Now, the Key West working lighthouse here was still a working lighthouse until 1969. The whole property is a museum today. Now, the original lighthouse was 4 blocks ahead at the southernmost point. The hurricane of 1846, a hurricane that they called the Great Havana, washed that lighthouse and 12 people inside into the water. There was 1 survivor, a 6-year-old girl. The new lighthouse was built here on higher ground in 1847. Anybody been up there yet?
No.
88 steps can take you to the top, and you can see every inch of this incredible island. The white building on the corner is the lighthouse keeper's quarters. It took 2 families to run that lighthouse 24 hours a day. They had several living quarters on the left and the right of the building. The children, those 2 front doors go into 1 common living room those families shared. But each family wanted their own door to the room. I like that. Now, my wife and I, for 45 years now, have lived in the house built in 1899 for my grandmother. You can't really see it from here, but if you're walking down this left sidewalk, it's the first little yellow shotgun house on your left. There's a white picket fence in front. That guy just set his knapsack on the window. The reason I mention it's a shotgun home is because here in the is a beautiful row of short shotgun homes. I don't dislike it, except it's prettier, it's yeller, it's made for it, and I get a better name. Okay, another one of my favorite stories starts with yellow fever. Now, we're an island on the northern basin of the Atlantic Caribbean, and yellow fever's hit it many times. The worst yellow fever epidemic here was the summer of 1829, and it took 15% of every man, woman, and child. Now, after 7 more major epidemics, and by the way, all of these are in the summertime. In 1895, Florida now had its first medical officer, in his house, named Joseph Yates Troy. It was sent back here to bring yellow fever under control. Now, in 1895, nobody knew what caused yellow fever outbreaks. That would be discovered in 1901 by a man named Walter Reed in the United States Army down in Canada. But Dr. Flora was lucky because in 1895 there happened to be abandoned nurses here with their own hospital that helped treat the fever victims, and they were good at doing it. The nurses, their hospitals, long gone. What I haven't said, the nurses were nuns, and the nuns are still here. St. Mary's Star of the Sea Catholic Compound Convent School came out of Basilica. Now, this is a good part of the story. The hurricane of 1906 orphaned a lot of children in Monroe County, and one of those was a 16-year-old girl by the name of Louisa Gabrielle. Now, this car trying to parallel park is probably not parallel parked in 12 years. Put me behind on my story, so I'm going to stop for that. Anyway, Louisa Gabrielle was one of the children that was orphaned in Montgomery County because of the 1906 hurricane. And when no one left on the island, Miss Gabrielle decided to become a novice nun at St. Mary's. Now, St. Mary's Star of the Sea Catholic Convent School is coming up on the right behind this coral wall. And by 1925, she was the Mother Superior. And she built something called a grotto. And she declared, as long as our grotto remains and is respected, then no harm will come to anyone in Key West from hurricanes. Now there's a bold statement thing. Coming up on the right, you can see an exit opening in the wall. You look through the exit opening all the way back, and you'll see her grotto is still there, and those candles are lit. It is respected. You see the grotto? Here's the fun part. Kids, that grotto's been there since 1925. Before 1925, the number of people that we know died on the side of hurricanes is 972. Now we know that because every one of those names is written down. But since 1925, not one name has been written. Nobody has died on this island of hurricane. It gets better. Before 1925, the number of Category 4 and Category 5 hurricanes that we know is directly hit Key West is 7. Since 1925, that number also is 0. Now we have had 1s, 2s, and 3s come right down the street. We've had incredibly close calls. Kids, I'm not Catholic, but I respect the road behind the church, and I think everybody here does. I am not going to debate religion with any man because, guys, that is a fool's debate. But before 1925, many people have died on this island of hurricanes, and since then, no one has. And I know what the nuns call it, and I know what the priest calls it. And I'm very aware of what my little Episcopalian wife calls it. But I do call it one of my favorite stories. And you can take that any way you like. Guys, I play poker, and the odds are against that ever happening, but it does. Now, one of the things that Trolly gets to do that we don't do on the train is it leaves the original island and goes to the man-made portion. You and I are fixing to do that. Now, there's a park coming up on the right side. That park has been called Bayview Park since 1901. And the first question out of your mouth should be, where's the bay? Well, it used to be direct ahead of us. It's not there now. I'm going to tell you in a moment where it is and why it's not there now. Now, we're fixing to cross an intersection. And the road we're fixing to cross today is called Jose Martin Drive. In 1901, it was called North Beach Road. It was right on the border. New York, look on the right. That kiosk. Massachusetts, look at that kiosk. We were an occupied city during the American Civil War. This was a Union city. I already mentioned that once. We were garrisoned by 3 volunteer regiments. One was from New York, one was from Massachusetts, and one was Pennsylvania. That kiosk I showed you on the corner of that park lists every man from those 3 volunteer regiments that died at Yellow Fever on this island. New York and Massachusetts, you might want to go back there and look at it if you have time. It's something that's not on the tour, but I thought these Boy Scouts might be interested. Okay, Key West today is 7.2 square miles in land area. We are twice as large today as we were in 1900. We were made from dredge that reclaimed the very shallow Florida bed that was here. Reclaimed by Henry Flagler when he built his railroad. Reclaimed by the Army Corps of Engineers when they built our submarine base and even the channels for the Navy ships. And the United States Navy has had a full-time presence here since 1922. There are 5 separate naval land areas in Key West. And 9 miles north of Booker Naval Air Station is one of the largest Top Gun training facilities in the Western Hemisphere. Make no doubt about it that this is a Navy town. In 2017, Key West is a central focal celebrating city for Navy aviation, celebrating 100 years. Because children, in 1917, Navy aviation squadron started with Squadron Number 1. There were 21 pontoon planes, and they started right here in Key West. It was a huge celebrating year for Navy aviation. And that brings me to my next stop. This is stop 6. This is one of the hotels in the trolley stops. The train doesn't stop at the hotel, but the trolley does. This is stop 6. This is the Fairfield Suites and Inn. Stop number 6. Oh, that's a gumbo luminary tree here. I never noticed that. With the red peony bark. That's a very bad example of a gumbo luminary tree. I'll show you a pretty one later. My favorite trees. Alright, anybody getting down here? No? Okay, let me check the time, see how long it is. I like it pretty good. I'm going to get back into this door. Oh, I'm supposed to open and close
It's the Key West Lions Club.
Lions Club.
And I'm going to concentrate on getting back to this 4 lane if you'll forgive me just for a second. Oh, plenty of room. My wife won't even let me drive her car. I probably shouldn't tell you that right now. She doesn't drive my motorcycle. On the left, those are mango trees on the, you guys know what mangrove trees are. You've probably already discussed it. But I'm going to show you mango islands being born on the other end of the island. Key West is not a mangrove island. It's fossilized coral. This is a coral island. But this is not on the tour either, but I think my Boy Scouts might like this. When I go over this little bridge, this little body of water to the right, that's called the salt run. It actually goes into the salt ponds on the other end of the island. I'll talk about the salt ponds when I get over there. The summer that I was 8 years old, my older brother started taking me with him to pull sponges. We pulled a lot of sponges out of that water. They were called sheep's wool sponge. At the end of the summer, we had about $300 if we split. I had $150, and I was 8 years old. My mother took that money right away from me. She put it in a little bank account, gave me a little bank book. You guys remember those little bank books? I had that. I think I was the richest 8-year-old in the house. Sponges. Key West at one time had one of the largest sponges industries in the world. They were sheep's wool sponge, just like the one my brother used to pull. They're considered one of the most valued on the earth. For those of you that don't know, sponges are not plants. Sponges are animals. They're green monarchs, some of the oldest metazoans on the planet. Now, the sponges industry went fine into the 1930s. In fact, by 1890, it was a $700,000 industry. 1,000 men would go out in the lower key shallows every day using wooden buckets and glass bottles to find the sponge, and would bring them up the bottom holes. Now, in the 1930s, the lower keys were hit twice with something known as a red tide. It's a very large and destructive algae blip that almost wiped out the sponge beds in the lower keys. It took about 10 years for them to recover. Unfortunately, by the time they had recovered, something called synthetic sponge had been developed and worked in there for a little kid. That is cellulose. It's ain't one of the in the store. We just couldn't be. Now on the left is a remnants of the bay. It goes into the Gulf of Mexico. That's if you know water, you can look at that water and tell there's something that is rather shallow. In fact, between here and those mangrove islands on the horizon, the average depth of the water between here and there is going to be less than 2 feet. That's the average. It was very easy to reclaim land from that water. That's exactly what we have here. Back when I was a kid, all this land here on the right was all mangrove swamps. Now, you may be surprised to learn that the highest temperature ever recorded on this island was only 97 degrees Fahrenheit. We have never hit 100. Now, the island mass is not large enough to generate a radiation yield, and we don't have tall buildings to maintain it. And during the summer months, just like today, we have the trade winds that come off the Atlantic Ocean. We're surrounded by water, and it does keep the temperature down. But these winds are the same ones that bring the tropical storms and hurricanes. They will keep the temperature down. Now, guys, don't get me wrong. The humidity makes it feel like 110. But 97 is our record high. And if you're interested in the thermal weather, that would be 41 degrees. And the last time we hit that would be 1969. That was the year I was graduating high school. I wasn't here. I was in military school playing baseball. My wife is Canadian. She's from Kingston, Ontario. And she's so Kingston to get up there. I personally have never seen a snowflake in my life. Samson in Southeast Asia. I tell my beautiful wife, now only 45 years, she has not seen one either. The mean temperature in the dead of winter here is 70.2 degrees and 30% humidity. We get the cooler, drier air coming out of the north and northwest. I think we have the most beautiful winters in the world. And that brings me to stop 7, which is the apex of the tour. From stop 7, we'll be making our way back downtown. And the only thing out here folks have a tendency to want to look at parking lots. Anybody get out here? We are just a few minutes past, so if you don't mind, anybody mind if I take a sip of water? Now, in that food bag there is a shake. It's an action shake. My wife put that in there and sent it with me. I'm not going to drink it. So if you want to help yourself, you're more than welcome to do it. Now, if my wife had said drink that shake, I would drink it. She didn't say it. So I'm not going to drink it. So if anybody back there wants an Atkins chocolate shake, you're more than welcome to it. But it ain't going to be consumed by yours too. I'm on a soft diet because of this gastric surgery. They took a half a kilo of power out of me. You probably just thrilled to death to hear about it. But I'm 70 years old. That's what we're talking about. Now, what my wife, by the way, her name is Wendy, doesn't know that also inside there is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I stuck it in. That will be consumed before I end the day. Dispatch 613 at stop 70. Love you. I was a chef all my life before I retired. When I did the military, that's what I did in Spain. Wendy, my wife, retired as a behavioral psychologist in the state. She's the one with a PhD from UBC Vancouver. I'm a very well-behaved individual. Now, I love to cook. I still cook. I cook for a lot of fundraisers on the island. And I do teach out of the college when I'm asked to at their culinary program out there. And I hope you get a chance to experience some of the really fine restaurants we have on the island, and we have a lot of them. And that brings me into my next story, which is Key West shrimp. Pink gulls or Key West pinks, what they call these. And I think they're the cleanest shrimp in the world. Now, we've always known that the Key West shrimp were in our shallow waters around the island. Nobody ever had any luck bringing them up in any numbers. That would change in 1959. I don't know if you've ever shrimped or been on a shrimp boat, but you shrimp during the daytime. That's all there is to it. In 1959, a boat by the name of Queen Anne was on her way to the Tortugas and the Gulf of Mexico to shrimp. She was having problems with the winch that controlled her nets. She dropped her nets at night about 60 miles west of here and worked on her winch. In the morning, she was winching up her nets, and they did not finally come up. Enough of her snagged. Can you see this one? They were full of shrimp. They were full of Key West pink shrimp. I mean, full. What we call the Key West pink is a species unto itself, and they only swarm fed at night. Nobody knew that. It changed the industry on the island. In the mid-1970s, when all the shrimp boats were leaving Key West going to Stock Island here on the left, they were almost shrimped out of existence. So they put moratoriums on the numbers of boats that could actually pink shrimp. And today they're bringing them up in very sustainable numbers. I'm really proud of them. Well, let's get back to mangrove islands for a moment. For those of you that don't know, a mangrove is a saltwater plant that has a root system that goes down into the water. Everything that floats by these roots gets caught up, and the roots have to keep going further out I leave here is where you get your test. There is a test when I leave here. You guys are aware there's a test. Okay, you'll like it. It's an easy test. And I'm supposed to open and close the door here for some reason. I don't know why. Go in. Now that's a gumbo limbo tree ahead of us, but it doesn't have any red peanut bark on it. I'll show you better. Just like this. Open the door. Close the door. Alright. You ready for your test? This is an easy one. We get a lot of smart guys in there. There's a body of water across the 4-lane. And the water. What is it? Don't say Bob. What's the name of this water? What is it? Somebody yelling at me. Atlantic. Oh shit, I'm from Massachusetts. I am ashamed of you. That's the Atlantic Ocean. There's a 9-knot sustained wind blowing on it. And if you look close, you can see little white caps all over that water, right? But what don't you see there? You don't see waves. There are no waves coming up on shore. That's the Atlantic Ocean. Now why? 7 miles directly ahead of us is the longest living coral reef in the Americas, and it brings up those wave systems before they get to us. That makes everything between there and here quite shallow. Like I have before, we've got the system of channel markers, millions of lighthouses, and that reef brings up a lot of wind chips. Now when I shipped it around on Key West, every minute of the boat on this island would hit the reef. My first job was at St. Ives. They saved thousands. Today's job is to make money. And they make millions. Jordan, it was because of our wrecking industry by 1856, we were the richest city in the United States per capita. We remained the richest per capita for 11 straight years. Channel markers, buoys, and lighthouses made it obsolete. Today is the job process. Now this is East Martello on the right, finished in 1862. I told you this was a Union city. Martello Fort is a small defensive coastal position garrisoned with about 25 men. There are 2 on the island. I'll show the other one when we go on. On the top of the old Martello Fort would be probably 1 rifled cannon. Now the cannon on the Martello Pier was never fired in anger. Oh, by the way, and this is not on the tour, but I try to tell the other, well, never mind. I'm just going to confuse this. Oh, maybe not. If you look up, if you Google Martello Fort, you'll find out the original fort that was called a Martello was round and it was on the island of Corsica. In fact, every Martello fort in the world, and there's probably about 1,300 left, are all round. Key West has the only Martello forts that were called Martellos that were not round. Don't ask me why. See, I told you it was just confusing. But Martello forts are interesting to research. Key West International Airport on the right. Some people joke that the name is longer than the runway. My wife and I love it. We're Delta Sky members, and we now have direct flights from Delta Jets from here to Atlanta. There are direct flights from here to Newark, direct flights from here to Dallas on United. So I do not make that drive to the Panhandle anymore to visit my relatives. We fly from here to Atlanta, Tallahassee, rent a car, and go. Because I'm not making that 13-hour drive anymore. I don't have to. Oh, this is not on the tour either. But if you look to the right, you can see the old control tower. It was destroyed, as you can see, by a hurricane 4 years ago that we called Irma. The first hurricane I ever went through. That was 4 years ago this September. I sent my wife out of here on this day. It's the worst I've ever been through. I have something now that I didn't have then for Irma. Because I can charge my toilet with my neighbor's pool water, and I'll eat out of a can, but I'll be darned if I'll ever be without air conditioning again. I don't have to. showed you the salt run earlier. I told you I went into the salt ponds. And on the right, as we go this way, you look at these trees, you'll see some very shallow water. Those are the salt ponds. Now, the average depth of the salt ponds out here is less than 12 inches. Now, in 1851, a very enterprising young man dated all the water coming out of the salt ponds. He let the sun dry everything up. He flooded it again, and then dried it up again. He did that 6 times. The end result? About 100 barrels of sea salt. And he made some good profit on that. We actually harvested sea salt in the salt plants with that method. So in 1865, but at the end of the American Civil War, the salt mines in southern Louisiana, the salt mines in the Great Lakes, made it not worth yet. Now those dark shaded areas you see in the shallows over there on the left are not deep waters. They're grass beds. And you can see the grass blowing up on the beach here on the left-hand side. And when we go by, you might smell it. But this time of year, the winds coming off the Atlantic will loosen that seagrass, which is basically turbid eelgrass, and bring it on shore. And like I said, you can probably smell it as we go by here. It's got a very heavy iodine smell to it. Some people find it disgusting, and it's something you really have to get used to. You smell it now?
Yes.
But to us, it's a bed of roses because it means those grass beds are healthy and out there. And that's where the younger crustaceans and fish have a chance to grow large and survive in deeper water. And like I said, it's something you got to get used to. But this time of year, the prevailing winds come off the Atlantic and loosen those grass beds up. They try to get them up as much as they can in the morning, but there it is. Now this is Smathers Beach on the left. Now, if you're looking for beautiful white quartz sand like they have up in the Panhandle of Florida, you're not going to find that here. We don't have that. Our sand is very coarse. You may have noticed that. The sand that we have here are broken down shells of coral. Calcium carbonate. I give extra bonus points if anybody can tell me where that beautiful white quartz sand came from in the Gulf. Anybody know where that came from? No. The Appalachian Mountains, millions of years ago, were taller than the Himalayas are now. You pick up a big handful of sand in Panama City Beach, Florida. You're looking at several million-year-old Appalachian Mountains. I like that. How about cigars? In 1831, a man by the name of William Wall started the first cigar factory in Key West. It was not until the late 1800s, with the revolution in Cuba against Spain, that many of the Cuban manufacturers came here and started rolling. And by 1895, there were over 100 large and small cigar factories in Key West. Total in 1895 alone, they rolled over 100 million cigars on the side of the rest. Fires, hurricanes, and especially labor disputes set it began. Where did we grow the tobacco? We didn't. We didn't. You see, Spain owned Cuba. Spain was taxing to death the Cuban cigar manufacturers on rolled cigars leaving the island. But there was no such tax on whole leaf tobacco leaving Cuba. And the United States had no such taxes either way. So those cigar manufacturers' consortiums came 93 miles away to this island, built their little factories, and started rolling. They could get the tobacco here on those without any problem. They made money. These guys made so much money. By the mid-1880s, they were petitioning the state of Florida to build their own bank. In 1890, they did. They were given permission to build two. They built one here, they built one in Canada. If you walk down to the very end of Duval Street, you'll see a beautiful red and yellow brick building. And the balconies on the side are made of Key West mahogany wood. Above the front door it says 1891. That's their bank. Some people will tell you that they built their own banks because they did not trust American banks. guys that had nothing to do with it. They built their own bank because they have permission to do so. They were given a charter to do so. It had nothing to do with trust. It had to do with money. So now we pay, instead of paying interest to somebody else, they were paying interest to themselves. And they made even more. Okay. Key West was a union city. In 1861, they made the gunship on the Key West intercepted 3 slave ships and nobody knew. 1,400 souls arrested and brought to the island. 297 men and women were already dead on board those ships. Some of the drivers don't like to tell this story, and I'll tell you why I think it's important. 297 souls. The only thing we could do with them, bury them in a mass grave. And they're buried in a mass grave here in our left. This beach. You can see a cement cap in the sand that reads African Cemetery at Higgs Beach. Underneath is where they're buried. Come back and read it. It's important to me because the survivors of those slave ships, their ancestors are still walking this island. Out on the left is West Marcello. That's the other Marcello port we were talking about. It's open to Key West Garden Club today. And it doesn't cost a penny to walk through there. Higgs Beach on the left is one of my favorites. My wife and I, on occasion, like to come out here at night and snorkel with our night lights. You can see about 60 yards offshore the top of an old sunken jetty. It's a great place to snorkel at night. At night, the nurse sharks will come on this side of the jetty looking for the crustaceans. A lot of fun. Good ones. Okay. Henry Morrison Flagler. Henry Flagler was a very rich man. He was the partner of John Rockefeller. Henry Flagler built a string of hotels in Florida, from St. Augustine all the way down to Fort Dallas Crossroads, which is what we call Miami. And he connected it with the Florida East Coast Railroad system. He finished the railroad to Miami in 1896, but he needed a deepwater harbor. So he said, take the train to Key West. And they did. It took 7 years to build. They had to build 47 bridges over open water and mangrove swamps to connect our Florida Keys. One of them was 7 miles long. Now that cost the lives of 160 men, and 120 of those dead was in one day, thanks to that 1906 hurricane we talked about. And it cost Flagler $80 million. And that was 1905. Do the math. But in January of 1912, a train rolls into Key West, and for the first time in our history, this island is connected to the mainland. And when Flagler got here, he built a hotel. On your left, top 10, Flagler's Hotel, the Casa Marina. It is built of imported German concrete, impervious to salt. The roof is handmade Cuban barrel tile. The lobby is Key West mahogany, and underneath is a 750,000-gallon water cistern that they still use. They don't drink it, but when they have enough, they water their grounds with it. Today, this hotel is managed by the Water Authority of New York. And many years ago, before most of you were born, I was this hotel's executive sous chef. Stop 10, the castle. Now, is anybody getting out here? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm still supposed to stop. Open the door. Close the door. I told you their cistern is still collecting rainwater for use. They do. They have a very sophisticated pump and filter system in this cistern, and it runs that collecting rainwater into their pump system for their grounds when they have enough. But look here on the side of the building. When we go by, you can actually see those old rain gutters coming down the side of the building, and notice that they disappear under the building. They're still collecting collecting rainwater. And it's becoming a very popular thing, even for private homes, is to collect rainwater for use. Why waste it? Now, a friend of mine lives across the street on the right. Her name is Sarah. You see that gray house over there? Look behind her ugly pickup truck. You see that one white pipe coming down? It disappears. Now, Sarah's whole gutter system around that roof is connected to that one pipe. She saves every drop of rainwater that comes out of it, which is why she has that beautiful lawn she can water without spending the money. Fresh water is becoming very, very expensive to get down here. So we're going back to the old ways. That's a good thing. Now, in 1856, we were the richest city in the United States per capita due to the wrecking industry. In the 1930s, there was something called the Great Depression. Key West had become one of the poorest. And the federal government sent down a man named Julius Stone, and his job was to find a way to turn the Key West economy around. Now, why was that important for the government? We have to remember that this island supported the military here. The Stone got here in the summer of 1935, and he thought Key West would be the perfect place for tourists. Go figure. They planted trees, they painted homes, planned to open Key West to the tourist trade in December of 1935, and used the train to bring them down. That was a great plan, except for one small thing. In September of 1935, the most powerful hurricane that made landfall in the Western Hemisphere made landfall in the Florida Keys. It hit 60 miles north of us in Manacumbe, and they called it the Great Labor Day Hurricane. When that hurricane hit Manacumbe Key, there were 800 people stranded on that island. When it left, 400 no longer lived. 12 miles of the railroad destroyed. The train was bankrupt, had been, and did not rebuild. Now, Florida had built 2-lane roads up and down these keys since the 1920s. And to totally connect that road together to the mainland, Florida needed a lot of bridges. And the railroad left a lot of bridges. And Florida used them and laid the 2-lane on top. We've been open to the north completely by a road since 1937. I know a lot of you may have driven down here, and you drove over a beautiful 7-mile bridge, but you saw the old 7-mile bridge still there, and it looks like a highway. It was built as a railroad trestle. I remember that old 7-mile. This is why. Now, Boy Scouts, you guys get to go out to Pigeon Key. Are you going to be able to get out here? It's the island that's halfway down over the 7-mile bridge. I know the Boy Scouts used to go out there and visit the research center out there. And that brings me to my next stop. This is stop 11. And this is the closest at the southernmost point, 2 blocks ahead of us. The Butterfly Conservatory, which is a block ahead of us and to the right. This is stop 11. I think you guys are getting out here, right, to the southernmost point. At least I thought you were. Maybe not. But if you do want to get out here, when you're ready to continue, you just come back to this stop. You're not on another trolley coming through. Just mark the time